there's one more piece of this that doesn't get talked about enough, the non-financial side. Because yes, the numbers matter, but so does confidence, so does clarity. And the kindest gift that you can leave your spouse is organization. A written income plan, a simple account list, contact information, where things are, who to call, not a drawer full of statements that nobody understands, but a roadmap. And honestly, this doesn't have to be fancy. People hear, the word plan, and they think binders and spreadsheets and overwhelming paperwork. No. Sometimes the most meaningful thing that you can do is simply make sure the basics are understandable. Where the money is, how the income works, who helps, what happens next, because confusion is hard enough. Confusion while grieving is something entirely different, because the spouse who survives is probably going to have decisions to make. Required minimum distributions, tax filings, beneficiary paperwork, account transfers, and they're doing it while grieving. And that's why preparation matters. I've seen families come together beautifully because there was clarity, and I've seen families struggle because there wasn't. The plan protects more than money, it protects people. And I think sometimes we forget that, because when people hear retirement planning, they think investments, returns, accounts. But so much of what we really do is help people prepare for life, the hard parts as well, because life changes. Sometimes health changes. Sometimes one spouse suddenly becomes a caregiver. Sometimes somebody passes much sooner than anybody expected. And while we can't control those moments, we can make sure that somebody isn't feeling completely lost financially, especially as I've watched families go through difficult seasons. I find that the people who usually do best aren't always the wealthiest. They're the ones who had clarity. They knew where things stood. They knew who to call. They weren't trying to solve a puzzle while grieving, and that matters, because the season after loss is hard enough already. Ellen and I spent months getting things organized. We simplified accounts, mapped out income, adjusted to her spending, built a system that actually fit her new reality. And about a year later, she looked across from me at my desk and said something that I still think about today. She said, "Barb, I wish Carl and I had done this together while we had time." And then she paused and she said, "But I'm so glad that we're doing it now." And that's really the lesson. It's never too late, but earlier is certainly easier. And earlier gives you more choices, more peace of mind, more confidence. And honestly, it lets both people sleep a little bit better, because when you've had these conversations, there's a different kind of comfort, not because life suddenly feels predictable, but because both people know if something happens, we've thought this through. There's a plan, there's clarity, and somebody won't be left trying to figure everything out alone. And I want to say something to the couples right now. If this conversation feels uncomfortable, that's okay. Most important conversations are. But uncomfortable now is a whole lot easier than overwhelmed later. Because what I hear over and over from surviving spouses is this: "I just wish we had talked about it sooner." Not because they wanted to think about loss, because they wanted to feel prepared. And prepared doesn't mean perfect. It just means you've taken time to think through what happens if life changes? Who handles what? Where are things? How does income change? Who do we call? Those conversations matter. And honestly, they're one of the most caring things that you can do for each other. And if today's conversation has you quietly maybe thinking about, we probably need to look at some of this, there's a good chance you're wondering the exact same thing. And if you'd like to talk through your own retirement picture, call 800-883-1518 and ask about a complimentary discovery call. There's no pressure, there's no obligation. It's just a conversation to see if there's any red flags or blind spots that might create problems later on. Again, that's 800-883-1518. And you can also request your complimentary copy of Retire Financially Fit. And then there's also some additional resources that we have for you at retirefinanciallyfit.com.